Staying in contact. I'm London Mitchell. The human cost of the death penalty. That's the title of a new report that paints a damning picture of the death penalty system here in Ohio. The report was released recently by Ohioans to Stop Executions. My guest is the organization's executive director, Kevin Werner. I asked him if the concern about the death penalty was financial, moral, or religious.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a little bit of both the financial concern and the moral concern, but the moral concern is really grounded in the impact that the death penalty system has on, number one, murder victim family members, sometimes referred to as co-victims, and then second, the impact that it has on state corrections workers. So the people whose job it is to actually carry it out. Those individuals, usually after in retirement, have talked at length about the long-term psychological damage that carrying out the death penalty system takes on folks. So it's incredibly expensive and incredibly traumatic for everyone involved, not just the family of the person who's condemned. The impacts go far beyond just that particular family. So wide ranging in terms of its the devastation that comes from the death penalty.
Seems like we're more concerned with vengeance than in trying to rehabilitate. This death penalty would seem to be the ultimate form of vengeance.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the statistics and the figures that are associated, the question that we're always left with is why are we doing this, right? We already know that, it's extremely expensive. I mean, the examples that we've seen are it can be anywhere from 10 times more expensive to, if we're looking at just the trial cost, those can be 27 times more expensive. But what happens is we often get the same result, which is not a death sentence, but a life without parole or a 30 to life or something that's other than a death sentence. So we're spending, hundreds of millions of dollars to get the same outcome that we could have gotten for a fraction of the cost without all of the turmoil and without all of the trauma and without all of the problems that come along with carrying out the system. So, you have to ask yourself, why do you continue to do something if, number one, you're not very good at it, right? We've had 11 people that have been freed because they were, drop dead, not guilty, right? Full turn. We know it takes decades for these cases to come to a conclusion, but then again, that conclusion is usually a life without parole sentence. There's usually a reversal. So what you're left with is it has to be about vengeance. There's no logical explanation. There's no way to sort of couch the results that we're getting for the human cost of trying to maintain this system, trying to make it right, trying to make it perfect. Because really, the death penalty system requires perfection, and we're just the furthest thing from being able to have a perfect system. Because, of course, people run the system, people make decisions within the system. And so, the only thing that we're really left with is the vengeance argument that this is justified because we want to get our vengeance. Dollars and cents, it doesn't make sense. Long-term impact, it doesn't make sense, and we're just not very good at it. So that's kind of what we seem to be left with is a punishment system that's not efficient, and that its only aim is really vengeance.
Your arguments aside, Kevin, what I've heard repeatedly over the years by those who favor the death penalty is it is the ultimate deterrent. Yeah, you're not you're not going to commit murder because you yourself might forfeit your life.
Yeah, years ago, I think that may have been the most compelling argument, right? When the states first started bringing the death penalty systems back after the Supreme Court had ruled the death penalty unconstitutional everywhere. But 40 years later, what we really have is data that suggests a couple of things. One, that homicide rates, not violent crime rates, are lower in states that do not have the death penalty. And then even in states that do have the death penalty system, uh, police and the public are safer when that state is not using its death penalty system. So it's a fascinating finding. That Death Penalty Policy Project looked at all of the FBI crime data going back more than 3 decades, and their conclusion is this: it's stunning. After 1,600 executions, the public and police are safer in states without the death penalty. If capital punishment serves a public safety purpose, having and using the death penalty should, over time, reduce a state's murder rates, or so the theory goes. Now, 52 years and 1,600 executions later, the death penalty laws and told the states to start over. That's after the Supreme Court told states to start over. We have a clear answer on deterrence, and the death penalty system does not deter crime. So this is sort of an example of what may have seemed like a reasonable argument 40 or 50 years ago. It just turns out that it doesn't hold water. It turns out that, again, the death penalty does not deter murder. It does not deter violent crime. It really just adds to the costs and to the ineffectiveness of a criminal punishment system that really doesn't focus on rehabilitation. It really doesn't focus on trying to make victims whole. It's just sort of like this tsunami of travesty and devastation.
And you're saying this, or you're presenting this side of the argument based on statistics, not necessarily your own morality.
Yeah, this is really, these are studies that have been done across the country for the better part of 3 decades, that folks have been looking at this and looking to see, after a state repeals its death penalty, for example, what happens with violent crime statistics, what happens with homicide rates. And again, none of those states have a rise in any of those categories. In fact, again, like consistently across the board, the states that don't have the death penalty system have lower violent crime rates, have fewer homicides each year. And so the theory that the death penalty is going to deter crime just is categorically wrong and false.
What is it that your organization would like Joe Average Ohioan to do in addressing this issue?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, understanding that everything that we were sort of told about the death penalty system is wrong. And the main arguments for why the state legislators brought it back have all been proven to be false, incorrect, or otherwise debunked. So first and foremost is to sort of educate him or herself a little bit around the issue. The second thing is to understand what the costs are, because we might disagree on what the best public policy is going forward, but I think we all agree that number one, subjecting innocent people to the death penalty system, we all agree we don't want that. Nobody wants to see an innocent person executed. So we agree on some really basic and important fundamental decisions that really lead us to a future that doesn't have the death penalty system in Ohio. I think the third thing really would be to contact your legislators. If you have concerns about the issues with the death penalty system, now's the time to be communicating those to legislators. We've had 2 pieces of legislation that are moving through the process. Actually, I think there's three different bills And so the legislator is going to continue to vet those bills. And so now is the right time for folks to chime in and say, I've got concerns about the death penalty, whether that's from the perspective of victim family members, whether that's from the perspective of, the law enforcement folks whose job it is to carry out the penalty, all the way to people who've been wrongfully convicted, and the enormous costs that come along with that. So it's really a good time for folks to be weighing in on this issue. So yeah, that's a great question.
And they can find out more information or at least find out about your research by going to your website.
That's right. And it's www.otse.org. It's O as in Ohioans, T as in two, S as in stop, E as in executions. And there's prominently displayed, for example, the new report that we just released, some pretty stunning findings there. One of which is that Ohio has spent over $1 billion now on its death penalty system since bringing it back, and it's just a stunning amount of money. So anyway, there's all kinds of information there that folks can check out, learn about, engage.
Kevin, when you say Ohio has spent $1 billion on its system or process, what does that mean? Trying to perfect it or to warehouse people on death row? What are we doing here?
Yeah, it's really just the fundamental administration of the system. So the figures that we have and understand, the Attorney General's office here says each death penalty case, they estimate, is $3 million per case. So anytime there's a death sentence, attach a $3 million price tag to that. That's from the trial, that's the appeals, that's everything that's going to come along with that sentence over the next, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. Well, we've had 342 of those. So the simple math of 3 million times 342 gives you 1.026 billion. Now, the other thing to understand is everyone that's looked at the costs have said that $3 million price tag is a low ball estimate. So we've spent, in all likelihood, much more than that 1.026 billion. And the thing that's so frustrating about this system is if we traced what happened to those 342 death sentences, where did they go? What happened to them over time? And about 50% of all of those get overturned, changed in some way, shape, or form to something that will never lead to an execution occurring. And so right off the bat, half of all of the sentences are wiped away because, now those are not people being released. Those are people whose sentences change to life without parole or 30 to life or some other sentence. And there's another, group of those where a governor commutes or individuals have severe mental illness, so they're removed from death row. So statistically speaking, any death sentence that exists today in the state of Ohio, we have 119 people on death row. Those 119 people are far more likely to have their sentence changed or a commutation or to die in prison of natural causes, anything except having an execution take place. But we're spending that $1 billion to get to the place where they're most likely going to die in prison before an execution takes place, or have their sentence commuted, or have a judge convert the sentence from death to life without parole, usually to some error. So we're spending all of this money to get a result that we could have gotten 30 years ago for a fraction of the cost. Like, it's really stunning.
Some really interesting facts and figures and discussion this morning, Kevin. I appreciate you being with us, and please stay in touch.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Take care. My guest this week, Kevin Werner, Executive Director of Ohioans to Stop Executions. Their new report, The Human Cost of the Death Penalty is available on their website, otse.org. I'm London Mitchell, inviting you to join me next week as we discuss issues facing our communities here in Northwest Ohio.
Previous episodes of Staying in Contact with London Mitchell are available on Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Podbeam, Podchaser, the Stream 419 app, Spotify, and londonmitchell.news.